Good afternoon and a warm welcome to all of you on this session today on procurement digital transformation and how to improve efficiency of your supply chain. My name is Kumar Malampalli and I am partner co-founder at Ryan Bouquet. I head the marketing function as well as offshore operations. I have close to 3 decades of experience in solutions, products, projects, and IT services. I am very passionate about this topic that we're talking about today, supply chain, procurement, and sourcing, and I look forward to a great session and an active participation from each one of you as well. We'll be happy to take questions from you towards the end of the session, so please feel free to use the question option on your screen to post your questions to us. We'll spend some time towards the end answering all your questions. I'm joined by 2 excellent speakers, so let me take 2 minutes introducing each of them. Firstly, I have Suresh with me. Suresh is CTO and Chief Solution Architect at Ryan Bouquet Consulting. He has close to 25 years of experience in solution architecture, technology, pre-sales, consulting, and he's worked all over the world defining, identifying, creating, and mapping solutions to key business problems for various customers. He comes with huge technical and solution expertise know-how, and he has actually worked extensively in this specific area of supply chain and sourcing, and he brings all this knowledge to the session today. Welcome, Suresh, and I look forward to speaking with you today. My next speaker is Basil Daniels. Basil is a partner and director at Abacus IT Solutions. Again, over 2 years of strategy, solutioning, thinking, defining IT strategies, and giving solutions to customers across the world gives him the right perspective to talk about all the challenges that we are going to be discussing today, the solutions to these challenges. And he would love to, explain how he sees customers across the Middle East add value to these solutions, add value to their problems by adopting solutions, digital transformation, and so on. Warm welcome, both of you, and I look forward to seeing you here today. We're going to be talking about 30 minutes on some key challenges that our customers across the Middle East have been facing. A recent PwC survey said that risk management, cost reduction, and digital transformation are the key areas where people are focusing on in the GCC region for especially the current year and the year coming ahead. Supply chain disruptions have actually made this whole journey a lot faster. People are looking for digital transformation and digital solutions to address supply chain problems, right? So in this context, the question that you should be asking yourself is, what should my company be looking at in this current context, right? And in the current context, what my company should be looking at is a digital transformation, yes, but how do I go on this digital transformation journey? What is the first step? How do we get there? What are the pitfalls? What should we avoid? So these are some of the things that we will be discussing today. And without much further ado, let me get started with the panel discussion. Warm welcome once again to people who have joined all over the world. My first question, this is to you, right? As I just mentioned, there is a lot of disruption that's happening. There are a lot of challenges. At the same time, there is also a strong push towards technology to address these challenges. So how do you see the impact of these recent disruptions on economic downturn and digitalization in this region?
First of all, thanks, Kumar, for having us at this event, and warm welcome once again to all our attendees. So just let's dive in straight away into your question. I've posed is a very pertinent question, and especially I'm speaking directly to the audience today on the call. This question is probably top of the mind recall for every single person on the call today, is how do we become more efficient in this area of the business? So, I mean, let me take you back a little bit to maybe about 24 months back in terms of, when we were hit, when the globe was hit with this, the game changer that changed all our lives, the COVID-19 pandemic, right? And when the outbreak first struck, lockdowns were imposed, right? Millions of people resorted to panic buying, right? Panic buying of all kinds of products, medical supplies, essential goods. And this actually took a lot of the companies which were supplying those products by surprise. All right, they never estimated that their products would be in such high demand and will move off the shelves so quickly, right? And that really tested, these organizations' supply chain, the supply chain process. Now, in terms of, and Middle East was no exception to that. Middle East also went through that phase where a lot of panic buying happened. And so what came out of that was, the surge in demand that I talked about, right? And one side, organizations had the surge in demand. On the other side, they had the tremendous pressure on supply chain and how to supply that demand that was coming through, right? And the pressure that was created on supply chain was not only in terms of production of your products and manufacturing of your products, getting it to the customers in time, but it was also in terms of labor shortages, right? Reduction in productivity and production from that perspective, right? And this had to be provided to employees of those organizations in a very secure and safe environment. And while doing that, in terms of reinventing yourself, how to adapt to these dynamic market changes, right? This showed a lot of businesses that there was actually no time to wait and think about their digital transformation journey. This actually triggered and speed tracked the digital transformation strategy within an organization right on top of the page, right, of their strategies. Because this was the only way that they could be sustainable and they could be resilient to the market demands and the ever-changing conditions in the market, right? And we have seen this, the sort of interactions that we as Abacus have been having with various customers of ours, the organizations that we're talking to adapt, business applications. And this is something that lots of companies in the region, when I talk about the region, I talk about the Middle East region, lots of companies here are actively now investing in digital technology, right? And that's predominantly, as I said earlier, to bolster the resilience of their supply chain and drive up productivity, right? While many of these organizations are still relatively young in terms of digital maturity and enablement, but many firms have already started this journey. This is not a topic that companies are discussing as a nice to have. It's become a must have now. And this has created a lot of opportunity as well, in the market when it comes to strategic sourcing and planning. Lots of opportunities have opened up in the GCC region, and this is not only limited to the private sector. We are seeing a lot of governments in the GCC also getting involved and actively encouraging and investing in this space. And some of the names that I'd like to just throw out there on the call today is what Bahrain is doing in terms of the Bahrain Economic Vision for 2030, the Kuwait Vision of 2035, the Qatar National Vision of 2030, Oman Vision of 2040, and Saudi Vision for 2030, right? So all these countries have recognized that without having a predictable supply chain process, sustainability will be at a very high risk. And supply chain predictability will only come when you when you start building a digital framework within your organization. So that would be my long-winded answer to your question, Kumar, that you asked.
No, absolutely makes sense. I'm also noticing customers are taking a relook at their priorities and revisiting their digital roadmap. It's a conversation not just in the GCC, but I'm seeing this in Europe, I'm seeing this in Africa, I'm seeing this even in North America. So definitely a top of the mind agenda, a very interesting place to start the conversation as well, because across GCC, there are major initiatives for digitalization, and supply chain disruptions, unfortunately, are not getting any better, right? So this is the sad truth in today's geopolitical scenario. However, I think we as technologists can offer solutions. We can't actually solve geopolitical issues, but we can only address problems from a solution standpoint. So, Suresh, this brings me to this question. What's been your experience when you're interacting with customers across the region on how the strategic priority of purchasing departments have changed in the last 24 months? What are the current priorities in terms of digital roadmap, digital transformation, or digital investment? Can you just talk about this from a customer perspective? You're on mute, Suresh.
Hey, thanks, Kumar. Sorry, actually, I was talking to myself. Yeah, thanks, Basil and Kumar, and Basil. Thanks for setting up the stage. Right now, if you look at when we talk about the drivers, right, or the strategic priorities, actually, we need to look at a couple of things. That what is forcing or influencing the customers to relook at their strategic priorities, right? That's very key. As Basil said, the pandemic has caused a lot of disruptions, actually. We have a new normal. That is what we can say, right? Kind of, this is not the way what things used to happen in the past. There's a complete a change in the way things are working. People are operating. Corporates are doing their business, so on and so forth, right? When you look at two important points, actually, one is there is a huge change in the thought process of people. Earlier, most of the organizations were thinking about growth, right? That was the kind of slogan for every organization. Today, people took a step back and started thinking about efficiency and productivity improvement, because that is the key mantra today in most of the organizations, actually. That is one important thing. So how do we improve productivity? How do we improve efficiency, right? The second thing is there are a lot of research and analysts talking about especially in terms of digitalization, right? If you take one part of it, which is procurement as a function, almost 80 to 85% SMEs are relying on spreadsheets for doing their procurement. When I say that, actually not for raising purchase orders, it is all about identifying suppliers, onboarding suppliers, or let's say basically how do we manage the CSR part of it, especially these days. There is a lot of rules or kind of compliance requirement in most part of the world to make sure my suppliers are not engaging in any child labor or any such things which is against the law of the land, so on and so forth. Now, without having a proper digitalization, it is impossible for people to look at such things actually and take right decisions on right time. The other important aspect is basically how do we manage risk, right? It's first of all managing risk. Before that, how do I identify the risk, right? Especially with suppliers, actually, from a supply chain point of view, logistics point of view, their sustainability itself, right, as a supplier. So these are all key things which we need to look into why people are thinking about actually digitalization. Now, the other important aspect is basically the cost control. When we talk about cost control, there are multiple things we have to understand. How do we get this cost control kind of achieved, right? Now, it could be in the form of negotiating with the suppliers. Now, we all know that actually economy of scale theory, right? Because you have more demand getting consolidated from different part of the world, different geographies, different organizational unit. How do we consolidate all those things together and negotiate with the supplier for a better price? How do we real-time adjust specifications actually? how do we pool or bundle different purchase requirements actually, right? And if I want to change suppliers, how quickly it is possible? How do I take action or proactive decisions before something really goes wrong? How do I identify the real-time risk of a supplier and start looking at an alternative supplier? For that, I need to have my supplier base much stronger, right? So how do I get a stronger supplier base? And naturally, the last but not least is basically the total cost of ownership. Now, the total cost of ownership, again, we can think about multiple ways, right? It is just about people doing the traditional way of, hey, I have a requirement, give me the price, and I will look at the cheapest and I will go ahead and buy it. The second thing is basically co-innovation, co-development, right? Identify certain strategic suppliers, work with them closely, give them right specification, let them exclusively make that for, prepare that or produce that for me. And based on which the long-run business, the long-term business is being assured. And the more and more supplier become efficient in manufacturing that, I get the benefit of it, or the supplier share the benefit of that with me as well, right? So overall, if you look at it, actually, digitalization is key. And when it comes to setting up strategic drivers, strategic priorities, as I said earlier, one is digitalization. And second thing is basically through digitalization, we will be able to achieve many things like risk management and identify early risk and take appropriate action, have a supplier base much stronger. The cost control can be achieved very quickly. Talent management is another important thing, right? When you talk about talent management, getting the right talent in the procurement team is also a key driver, because people started realizing procurement is not just a function, anybody can do it, right? You need to have the right skill set, especially not for the common items, but there are a lot of technical buying where people need to have the right skill set in terms of putting the spec together, working with the suppliers closely, and getting the right price from the suppliers, so on and so forth. Actually. So as I said earlier, the key influencer, or I would say that actually the key driver for setting up the new priority is the change in the thought process, which is growth to productivity and efficiency. And that leads that change. And the new drivers are basically, as I said earlier. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks, Suresh. Very key points that you brought in there. And I just wanted to ask the follow-on question to Basil. Basil, in your experience, what has been the impact of digitization on improving supply chain visibility? Because Suresh has talked about visibility and improving efficiency and risk mitigation. He talked about several different things, right? I just want to zoom in on a couple of items here. How can customers increase supply visibility, whether it is supplier visibility or supply chain visibility, right? Both of them, not just one of them. Both are equally important. And of course, how do they reduce risks? So what is the impact of technology on procurement processes, like things like supplier selection, demand planning, supplier risk management, supplier management, contract management, so on. There's a bunch of stuff that Suresh spoke about. How can digitization improve these things? Can you just talk a little bit about this?
Sure, Kumar. I think, yeah, very valid point. I think, again, dovetailing back into what Suresh was saying, it's not only, simple buying or procurement anymore. It's having that visibility right from where the product is being manufactured, even before that, even what the raw material traceability is, right up to the end consumer. And let me address that point which you raised. Let me base it on some actual statistical data, rather than me inventing something. So let me refer to a report that was prepared by two well-known names in the market. First of all, Gartner. Gartner, I'm sure everybody's heard of, who's on the call today, one of the leading IT analysts. And what Gartner is saying that more than 50% of organizations have not yet actively started to build a roadmap for supply chain, digital supply chain transformation. And that's a scary thought, And I'm glad we're having this conversation today, and we have 53 people on the call today, right? And I hope that we are touching some nerves or providing some sort of insight to the audience today in terms of why this is so critical, right? And the second statistical data I want to talk about was published by a company called McKinsey, again a very world famous name. And McKinsey basically have published a report. The heading of the report is Supply Chain Leaders Expect to Focus on Resilience and Digitization. Now, this is as a result of a survey, probably that what they've done. And they've identified three key topics out of which stand drastically out from that report. Is 93% plan to increase resilience across the supply chain. And if I break that down a little further, what that means is in terms of dual sourcing of raw material. So you're not dependent on just one supplier. You are spreading your liability and your risk, right? 53% of those supply chain leaders talked about that. 47% talked about increasing inventory of critical products, right? So just imagine if you're a paint manufacturer or a chemical manufacturer, or you're assembling some sort of a machine. The components that go into these kind of things, or the raw material, some of them are critical, some are non-critical. But what they're saying was what supply chain leaders are thinking now, that the critical components I should have in my storehouse. So, I don't have to, if there's a disruption out there, my production line is not affected, right? 40% are talking about near-shoring and increasing a supplier base. So working with suppliers who have a geographical proximity to themselves. And 38% are talking about regionalizing supply chains. So consolidation of supply chains, consolidation of procurement departments within organizations. The next biggest thing that McKinsey talked about is 90% plan to increase digital supply chain talent in-house. Now, this is going back to what Suresh was saying earlier in terms of having the right skill set to actually work in your procurement department. And I have to break that down further, 70% reskilling today's labor force. Okay, so there's a lot of intensity and focus on how do we upskill our people to be able to, first of all, work on digital tools, to work on technology, at the same time, understand the market conditions better. The second thing out of that is 55% acquiring new talent from labor market. Now, I was incidentally just before this meeting, I was reading a post on LinkedIn from Emirates Airlines, where Emirates is just going crazy right now in terms of recruitment, because obviously during the pandemic they had to lay off a lot of people because their business was really down. But now since it's ramping up, they cannot recruit fast enough, right? So talent acquisition has become a very, very key issue, right? And the third component that I would like to talk about today is the 54% of those supply chain leaders expect changes in their supply chain planning after COVID-19. So the COVID-19 has become like, BC and AD. It's like a very clear demarcation line before and after. So they're seeing this after as a completely different world. Life has changed, right? So let me break that down a little further for you. So out of that group or that metric, 58% of those supply chain leaders are centralizing supply chain planning. So again, consolidation of procurement within the company gives you more leverage with your suppliers. 50% are retaining faster SOP cycles, and 60% are implementing advanced analytics. Let me just shed some light on the last point here, which is advanced analytics, right? And this is something that is a starting point of a digital platform, right? Is where is my data and what can I do with my data, right? So moving away from the hundreds and thousands of spreadsheets that you got out there into a standard platform where you're putting in data. So that's something which is driving a lot of adoption of digital platforms is data analytics. What do we do with this, right? And people have heard of things like, using big data out there, which includes data on users, suppliers, master data, transactional data, and this is built over a period of time. And then you have digital tools that can give you a predictive analysis or trend analysis on how your market is behaving, right? So that is giving you meaningful insights into into how to predict, how to better manage, in case, God forbid, this happens in the future again, right? Organizations will be ready today to deal with that wave that's coming their way, right? And, it goes on to maybe the next generation stuff after they put in a digital backbone or platform in the business. So they can put in things like, what's new technology called natural language processing, blockchain and IoT, and cognitive procurement. So these are things which are the phase two after you put in a digital supply chain, application processes within your organization.
Very, very key points, Basil. I couldn't agree with you more. And despite what you talked in the second part, the first part is something that absolutely stood out, which is that 50% of the people have yet to start a digital transformation journey for, especially on the supply chain side. Traditional, of course, a lot of companies have already adopted an ERP, if not an ERP, at least a financial management solution. But supply chain, I think the pandemic hit everybody by surprise because people were still maybe in the early stages of thinking about doing something when they got hit. And now there's a big push. But at the same time, maybe people don't know where to start. So maybe, Suresh, just a quick 2 minutes on what is your advice to organizations if they're planning a digitization strategy for procurement. Where do they start? What is the right procurement technology? In fact, there's already a question from someone. I will just add on that question here because it's kind of relevant to this point that we are talking about, which is, are there any solutions available out there which can be integrated to an ERP? I think we are going to be talking about it shortly, but you can maybe touch upon it a little bit. This question is from Arun, and I'll just elaborate it a little more. They're saying trying to get comparisons, getting best price, bulk technical forecast of order, comparing prices of suppliers, and so on and so forth. I think we are going to be digging a little deeper into this anyway along the course of the session. However, maybe Suresh, a quick 2 minutes on where can customers start and what is the journey? How can the journey progress from there?
Oh, absolutely, Kumar. And the most important point is basically looking at the maturity of the organization when we get into the digitalization, right? Because that is very key. Sometimes the digitalization process is not very easy. Let us accept that reality. But can we stay away from digitalization? Which is absolutely impossible, right? Because if you want to be in the race ahead of our competition, at least par with the competition, you have to digitalize your organization, especially in certain areas, right? And we have seen some of the organizations very successful, especially during the pandemic. And those who have done the digitalization in the past, they started taking a real benefit during the pandemic, right? And they were running ahead of all others actually, as far as their business is concerned. Now, many of the organizations have already an ERP in place. And when we look at those ERP, the question is basically, I already have an ERP, why should I go and have certain digitalization done in procurement? And thanks to the question to Arun, because at least you realized the white space or the gap, which is already available in the ERP side, right? That's the typical scenario. That's the fact with most of the ERP system. If you break the entire procurement digitalization, the process into 2 or 3, you can see that source to procure and the entire source to contract, or you say that actually procure to expedite, right? Or procure to pay. So what happens is basically the procure to pay part is mostly been taken care by most of the ERP system. Though again, there is a white space when it comes to the expediting process, right? But source to the supplier onboarding as well as the source to procure and contract lifecycle management is a white space with most of the ERP systems. That is where the tools like MeRLIN, right? I'm going to showcase that tool kind of at a very high level after this session. But typically, tools like MeRLIN will really help organization to fill that gap or have something in that white space, right? Which takes care of identifying right suppliers, onboarding them, managing their risk, and identifying and looking at the benchmark price of any of the category which we buy. do comparison. When we talk about comparison, it can be very complex, right? It is not just, as I said, people have been moving away from or transforming their procurement from a price-based procurement to more of a strategic procurement. Now, when it comes to strategic procurement, there are multiple evaluation takes place, maybe technical in nature, commercial in nature, the risk in nature, and definitely the CSR and the vendor evaluation itself. We look at all these things from a complete 360-degree point of view and say, who are the suppliers whom I'm going to work with, right? And these are all safe bets, and I'm going to work with those suppliers actually. And that suppliers identifying, working with them, getting quotes, and raising RFP, and getting a comparison done in multiple comparisons or multiple evaluations, agreeing on a contract, collaborating with the supplier in terms of the contract, and multiple stakeholders in the organization. At the end of the day, the key takeaway from here is basically value creation. That is what most of the organizations are looking at it, right? When I say value creation with different stakeholders internally, and the suppliers, as well as the internal requisitioners, or I would say internal customers. And as long as we are able to create that value, we will be able to really show that digitalization really helps us. And in summary, to answer that question, yes, there is a tool available which can easily integrate it with different ERP systems to fill that white space, fill that gap. And that's exactly what products like MeRLIN offers to the market, right? And it takes care of the entire procurement needs, supplier onboarding, source to procure, contract lifecycle management, the procure to pay. So you have the complete value chain being addressed through products like MeRLIN. And you will see that actually in a couple of minutes' time.
Thank you, Suresh. Basil, you want to add anything quickly? A couple of minutes on this, especially if I'm, thinking of starting something like this. Where do I start? What is my first step? Do I look at processes or do I look at people? Where do I actually start?
So I think, and again, coming from what I'm seeing with some customers and trends in the market that we're dealing with, is lots of organizations are moving away from the concept of one size fits all. So gone are the days where they said, okay, an end-to-end ERP can do everything for me, because businesses have got, because economic pressures, businesses have had the mandate from your board of directors to become more lean, at the same time grow and be more efficient, right? So in those scenarios, your end-to-end ERPs will fall short. And now businesses we have seen in the past 12 months or so have now started thinking about best of breed. So bring in best of breed products, which are specialists in those areas of the business, and get that consulting capability from those organizations, and let those products seamlessly talk to each other, integrate. Because integration nowadays is a moot point, is negligible, right? Because the technology platforms have gone so advanced that you're not sitting down and writing code anymore to integrate two products, right? So that's one thing I wanted to start with. Second thing is, I think the two key points are, number one is knowing your processes very well. So sit down and understand what your processes are, where you want to be in the next 10 to 15 years, right? And who are the people that are going to be a very, very critical part of those processes. So those are the two things. So processes and people is something that we would expect our customer to bring to the table. What we will bring to the table is the product and the consultancy capability, right? And with these three or four things put together, I think we have a win-win situation in any case.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We've had a whole bunch of questions coming over to us. So please wait. Just before I hand over to Suresh, I have been sharing the screen for a second now. Thank you, Basil. Thanks, Suresh. So far, very, very interesting points that have been brought up here. Just to connect the dots, Suresh, I think a quick glimpse at the product will be very, very helpful for people to appreciate, what we are saying. This is not there in your ERP. Yes, what is not there is, all these upstream features I have shown on the screen, right? Very briefly, how to categorize all your procurement into different categories, become more structured in your approach, how to handle your suppliers, how to onboard, manage suppliers, how to actually source from these suppliers. Do you want to do an RFI? You want to do RFQ? Do you want to do auction? Do you want to do closed RFP or open RFP? we want to do the technical bid and commercial bid separately, so on. Then once you have that, how to do a contracting, and then of course the demand has to come from the system. So you do requisitioning, and once we have the requisitions in place, you create a demand, you create a sourcing activity, you may issue a purchase order, and then you may expedite the order. So this is, very, very, very quick nutshell, right? An elevator pitch on what is MeRLIN. And with this, I will hand it over to Suresh. And Suresh, I really am looking forward to this quick view of the product. I will stop sharing and I'll hand over the control to you. Thank you, everybody, and we will be answering your questions shortly.
Yeah, thanks, Kumar. So I think I have that 15 minutes to showcase this, right? That's all what I have.
Yeah, because we have a bunch of questions. So if we can just show a quick glimpse, and if anybody is further interested.
Okay. Thank you for giving me enough time, Kumar, and being very liberal, right? Okay. Anyway,
it always happens. Trust me.
Absolutely. So you can all see MeRLIN, and I've logged into MeRLIN, and definitely MeRLIN has got multiple login profiles, or I would say that actually login options. You have a complete mobile app available both for vendors as well as for internal buyers and requisitioners. You also have a supplier portal as well as a buyer portal, right? And the moment you log in, you definitely get to see a landing page where it is talking about how much is my target saving versus actual savings. And this is where the big change, right? Because as I said earlier, it is not that procurement is a cost center anymore. It's a profit center, right? Because I set savings targets, same like actually I'm setting up a revenue target for my sales guys. I'm setting a savings target to procurement guys, and I'm monitoring how much did they actually contributed against it actually, right? And these are options which is allowing me to drill into the more details, and I can go back and see, hey, what kind of level of information I want to look at it. You can also see other information like, as I said, efficiency and productivity is one of the key area what people are looking at. Once you have a system like MeRLIN, it is important for you to look at how are we doing against the targets, right? In terms of the cycle time, in terms of the efficiency. Now, you can see each and every process in MeRLIN, which Kumar was showcasing in that PowerPoint deck. It is all listed down here. We also say that actually how many hours are there for completing a particular transaction process. And how are we doing against it? You can see when it comes to supplier registration, we are doing much better than what it is being forecasted or targeted. Auction, we are doing we have a much better improvement in terms of the efficiency. But if you look at the budget as well as category management, yeah, we are not doing that great because it is taking more time than what it is supposed to take it. Now, the purchase order spent by month, you can see here in terms of how much is preferred and non-preferred buying, right? Because again, maverick spend is something which everybody wants to control. When I talk about maverick spend, I want you to know how much do I buy from a preferred supplier or approved suppliers, how often and how much am I buying from a non-preferred supplier. The more and more I'm buying from non-preferred suppliers leads to the maverick spend as well as a lesser compliance in terms of the corporate strategy, right? Or the procurement strategy. Now you can also see that actually what are all the payment terms, how much do I buy? Now, mostly I buy for 45 days payment term, why not 60 days? Is there a room for improvement actually? These are all the information, real-time information, what it provides to the CPOs or director procurement, the procurement managers and the buyers themselves, right? And how much what are all the sourcing criteria? How do I buy from certain suppliers often? And how much do I buy with contracts? How much do I buy without contracts? The more and more I buy without contract is leading into much more chaotic situation, especially because I end up in spending more actually, right? You can also see here which country I'm buying it from, and if I have multiple locations, which other locations they are supplying it, right? You can see here from Germany, they are supplying to Gabon, right? And from Mexico, they supply to France, and the USA as well, they supply to France. So I know very easily actually in case of a issue in a particular geography, which are all the location is going to get impacted, so I can take necessary actions quickly. How many suppliers are supplying on time, right? And in full. And you can see how much is the OTIF by supplier, expediter, and region-wise supplier kind of allocation. This is an interesting slide, and this slide talks about how much do I buy and what are all the rating of the suppliers. The supplier rating is done dynamically based on multiple parameters like on-time delivery and compliance to the processes and any other CSR. And also it looks at the price. Also it looks at the payment terms. You can keep adding more and more parameters and set of weightage against it. And system is plotting the entire suppliers into a 9 box where it is clearly informing the CPO or director of procurement or the buyer what kind of procurement or purchases we have to stay away and what we need to do. And you can also go here, all these categories are there. If I go and remove all these categories except the electrical ones, you will see only the electrical category here. I can see supplier is rated very badly, but we are spending heavily with that supplier. So system is suggesting you must investigate the spend of that with that particular supplier. There is something fishy going on, right? But if I am not spending with a supplier who is rated very well, that is again bad. I'm spending with a supplier who is rated bad, but I'm not spending with a supplier who is rated well. So there is something going wrong, right? So we can easily figure out actually where do we stand and how the buying patterns are, what do we need to do in terms of managing that, so on and so forth. You also have a lot of other information, my sourcing information, supplier information, reminders, actions, auctions, and all of the kind of things actually. You can also see it supports multiple languages, and you can pretty much use any language which you want. And you can say, I want to use English, Arabic, German, French, any of those things, Spanish. You can also change the theming and styling of the system. You can also pretty much go and work with different other kind of color schemes. That is an option. You also can have an org structure. When we talk about org structure, you may have multiple entities underneath the corporate umbrella. There was a question I have seen, is it better for me to buy it individually at each company level, or should I go for the consolidated procurement? Always the best practice is basically to go with a consolidated procurement, because you will be able to leverage the better price because of the larger volume you are going to place to that particular supplier, right? So you will have visibility overall volumes, and you can negotiate and get the advantage of economy of scale. You can also see that actually there is a collaborator capability like Facebook, Twitter. You can tweet to your suppliers. You can real-time communicate with your suppliers and other stakeholders. Actually, you can also get notifications real-time and work with that. Notifications can be made available on mobile phones or as an email. All these different capabilities are there. Now, if I go and look at this dashboard, is entirely configurable. It's completely up to us how to want to configure those dashboards. Actually, that option is also possible. Now, when you look at different functions, you can see here supplier management is one of the key functions. What do we have? When we talk about the supplier relationship management, it's all about identifying right suppliers for a category, onboarding them, and sending them registration link. They register, they update, make sure that actually they are 100% compliant to the process. As and when any changes to be done, they request it, they do the changes and manage the entire supplier relationship management, right? Manage the supplier for the entire life cycle. You can also do frequent feedback surveys actually and make sure that actually suppliers are answering to the question what we are raising, to make sure they are compliant to the compliance process and any other processes what we are laying down. That is something which we can have it. You also have the entire category management, and you can have the categories based on the UNSPC standard, and you can have all those categories being listed, and the categories you can pretty much talk about who are all the suppliers, blacklisted, gray listed, or qualified suppliers actually, who can, where we can buy that material, what are all the controls we need to put in place. The entire category management is possible. You can also see budget management. You can also see that actually program BOM management, where you can have a direct interface with your PLM solutions. If you have a PLM, PDM kind of solutions in place, they throw the bill of material and we can directly consume that. And against that, you will be able to go and get the price from the suppliers and do a should cost analysis very quickly, right? Requisition management is another functionality what you can have it. So people can raise requisitions, or it can come from the respective ERP system itself. The requisitions can be get consolidated in the form of a demand, and we can either buy against those requisitions or demands, or you can create an RFQ process against such demands actually. And all those RFQs can be made available. You can see whether both RFI, RFQs are possible in the system. Any moment, if you want to get into an RFQ, you can see the RFQ in full. And all those RFQs are talking about different types of RFQs, especially is it a sealed bid, open bid? Is it limited by invitations, or it is open for all? You can have all these different capabilities actually listed down, and you can also see that actually what kind of template am I going to use for, how many stakeholders are there actually, and who is going to be part of the commercial evaluation team, who is part of the technical evaluation team, what kind of parts and services are we going to buy it, how many attachments are there, and all those attachments can be made visible and people can see that. Once all these things are done, pretty much what you can also do is basically you can go from here and see, I want to pretty much look at the supplier a portal. This is where I'm loading into the supplier portal. Supplier loads in, they can change language, they can do all those things. They can also go and access the RFQs, what is being published by the buyer. I will be able to respond to those RFQs actually. I will be able to respond to those e-auction. It supports multiple type of auctions. I can also see that actually how can I participate in the overall contract ordering process. Purchase orders can be made visible and I can respond to the purchase orders. I can accept it. I can expedite that. I can keep updating the vendor. And I do the invoice submission as well as once the payment is done, I get the analysis, I get the information. I can do the entire supplier analytics, and supplier process can be also done in the system. And that process is also possible as far as the system is concerned, right? Now, you can also see once all these responses have been received, you have an option in terms of going and doing either a technical evaluation or commercial evaluation. And when you're doing a commercial evaluation, you have an ability to see how many suppliers I have invited and how many suppliers have responded to that. I have an ability to go and straight away go and look at the responses received from there. And I will be able to go and look at comparing multiple options and proposals, what is being received. And I will be able to take decision as well on that actually. The system allow me to go and look at those information. System allow me to go and do comparisons. Actually, if I go into commercial evaluation, you will see that the responses what I have received side by side. You also get to see that actually you can see it has already been sourced, right? That has already been done. Otherwise, I will be able to see those information. I can take right decision on that actually. So what it allows me to do is in terms of any such comparisons, right? If I go and look at commercial evaluation here on a published one, you will see that actually the only one supplier who has responded to it. If you have multiple suppliers, you will see all those responses side by side. You also get to see that actually how much is the price in different currencies actually. And you can also see the overall price for each and every item as well. The net present value is being calculated. We will be able to take decision. We can also go and say that actually which supplier I'm shortlisting. Once it is being shortlisted, I have an ability to go and say I can create an award package. Once the award packages are created, naturally what I do is the award packages are nothing but the summary or decision of that particular RFQ, RFI process. Then we can pretty much go and do the contract management. You can order a contract, you can share it with vendors, internally with different stakeholders. Your legal is going to be part of it. Finally, you have the contract electronically signed through the system. The digital signature is part and parcel of MeRLIN, and you will be able to manage that. Once that is being done, you also can create purchase orders, and you can also see that actually expediting, receiving, invoicing, all those different capabilities are possible. And all sort of business administration, configuration, and approval lifecycle, all can be configured. I have seen a comment or a message from one of the participants that can we create complex workflows? Yes, the configuration in terms of defining complex workflow is part and parcel of the system. And you will be able to define and configure the system end to end based on your processes. That is where the flexibility comes into the picture. As Basil said earlier, the one size doesn't fit all. Hence, you have the ability to configure, but following the best practice in the procurement industry, right? And to drive the value creation and drive the strategic procurement transformation. That is what MeRLIN in a high level 30,000 foot view. And we are more than happy to showcase the entire product end to end with any of you who are interested. in detail, but the time, I don't have enough time in terms of going through process by process, step by step, to showcase the entire MeRLIN at this point in time, because it is huge, and end-to-end process when it comes to procurement can be automated through MeRLIN. Kumar, I hope I haven't taken more time. You have 10 minutes.
We are good. We are good, Suresh. We have a whole bunch of questions. I'm not sure how much time we will have to answer all the questions. If we miss anybody, we will 100% get back to you over the email. So just to cover some quick questions related to the product itself, there are a whole lot of questions have come. There's a question from Tarun asking, we have source to procure and procure to pay. Are they separate modules, or is it all one system? So I think you have shown it, but maybe you can quickly answer. We can see all the features are already here. So yeah, maybe Suresh, you can quickly answer.
Correct. It covers the end-to-end functionality, as I said, the end-to-end source to procure, the contract lifecycle management, and the procure to pay, right? All functionality is being covered. The only part which is not covered is basically processing the payments, right? We expect the ERP to process the payments and that information to be brought into MeRLIN, because our intent is to complement the ERP rather than competing with the ERP, right? Most of the organizations have already put a process in place in terms of ERP, their overall process, finance and accounting, and so on and so forth. We don't want to go with a new tool where we say partially you do it here, partially do it here. Rather, you get a tool which is exactly going to fill the gap what you have in the ERP, so you have an end-to-end process digitalized.
Absolutely. There's another question related to the product itself from Danya. She's asking, the products that we were evaluating are mostly focusing on indirect material purchase, but is there any option to do direct material sourcing in MeRLIN, because we could not find a solution for that?
Absolutely, Kumar. If you look at the history, right, and many systems, what is available in the market, almost all of them were doing or meant for indirect procurement. Hence, this question would have come up. And direct procurement, you don't see many systems actually. The challenges what the direct procurement people face is completely different from indirect procurement, right? So MeRLIN, the priority or the focus is basically direct procurement, but without compromising the need for the indirect procurement, right? So all the challenges in terms of direct procurement, especially to integrate a link with the PLM, PDM systems and ERP systems in the very early R&D stage itself, bringing that bill of material, making sure that actually what is going to be the should-be cost by looking at what price is available, as well as what price we can source it from the supplier, and the entire integration from a material perspective, strategic procurement in terms of identifying the best value for each and every part or item or category and a supplier. The entire capability is part and parcel of MeRLIN.
There's one question from Mohammed Abdul Basit. How do we do cost optimization? I know it's actually, I'm not sure if we have time. It's a fairly broad question, but maybe you want to take a shot.
Absolutely, Kumar. I understand the reason why he's asking that question, right? Because that is where I was talking about the transformation from a price-based procurement to more value-driven, value-based procurement, right? How do we do cost optimization? First of all, there are multiple ways. The first thing is basically, do we have the correct cost? Or do we have the correct price, right? How do we know that, right? That is where we are offering a capability of price benchmarking. So you will be able to benchmark your price with the industry price and in the market price, and you can see how high or low you are. Actually, if you are low, then well and good, right? You have already done that optimization. If it is high, definitely what room is there to negotiate and bring it down? Number one. Number two is, during the entire RFQ submission as well as response itself, what kind of information are we going to ask from the vendors? Is it just price and payment terms and Incoterms and locations, so on and so forth? Or, as I said earlier, the co-innovation, co-development provides me the capability to ask the vendor or force the vendor to enter information in terms of how do I manufacture this? What ingredients are getting used? Let's say there is a product which is made out of steel, right? And I will ask, what amount of steel are you using, right? And the steel price, I can get it very easily from the London Metal Exchange or somewhere else, right? So what I can do is, the moment steel price goes down, it gives me a capability to identify to what extent I can negotiate with my suppliers. Straight away, I will raise an RFQ to revise the price with my supplier. And anyway, we are doing a co-development, co-innovation, right? We can say, hey, supplier, you are getting benefited. 15% price has gone down. You may have to share 10% with me, right? I'm not saying the entire 15% you may have to share with me, right? So that is where it provides the capability to do cost optimization, and all sort of cost is being taken in. It's more of market-based, margin-based pricing. So I know what margin they are taking, right? There is a visibility being given. It's a transparent relationship we have. It's a long-term relationship rather than a buyer-purchaser relationship. It is a buyer-supplier relationship. It is more of a partnership relationship, right? That is where it gives me that capability and room for cost optimization and renegotiating the cost and getting the better price.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you answered a couple of other questions also, because there was a question also from Arun asking how do we calculate savings. So I think you have at least partially answered that. There are probably it needs a lot more detail, but I hope Arun, you have also got your answer. There was a question from Amit. Can you float inquiries through the system? I think the answer is absolutely yes. Suresh just showed you, right? You can create RFI, you can create RFQ, you can create auctions. So the answer is absolutely yes. We can float inquiries through the software to any vendors. You can add more vendors and you can create competition. I think there is a question from payment automation. I think you already spoke about it, so that has already been answered. So I'll come back. We have time for just one more question. Unfortunately, we have 3-4 questions, so I will just maybe pick one question which hasn't been asked yet. Basil, this one is to you. What is the ROI, or on what basis do we take a decision on this digital investment? How will I calculate it?
So let me put it very simply, Kumar. It's by using a system like MeRLIN, what are we achieving in the business? We are achieving savings, right? I mean, from a financial perspective, that's what we're achieving. We're achieving savings. So it could be in terms of price leverage with suppliers, could be in implementing efficiency into our processes, which is time saving. So at the end of the day, we are saving, right? Which translates into dirhams, dollars, euros, whatever currency, right? And that goes straight to your bottom line, right? And in my opinion, if I've done the homework correct, if you can save between 0.5 to 1% on your procurement, that itself pays for the system straight away. So, I mean, ROI on a system like this is pretty straightforward and easy to establish. It's not as complex as establishing an ROI for an ERP.
Yep, absolutely. I think we will end with that because ROI is always the top of the mind question for a digital transformation journey. Thank you so much. Such a simple way to compute ROI, pretty clear, pretty straightforward. There is a whole bunch of additional questions, and Suresh, there's a lot of questions still for you. I will do one thing. We'll make sure we'll respond to each and every one of you over email. Apologies, but we are exactly on the dot, so we would like to take a stop here and we will get back to you over the evening. Thank you so much. You've been a great audience, so many questions, so much interaction, and thank you, Suresh, for the high pressure demo, and thank you, Basil, for bringing in all those fantastic data points from McKinsey, from Gartner, from so many other critical expert opinions from across the globe, all relevant to the GCC region. That was the beauty of it. So thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the future sessions. Thank you.
Thanks, Kumar. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Kumar. Thank you, Basil. Thank you.
Bye. See you.